And welcome aboard our first guest, which is Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning.
Right, so, what next are the government going to have to U-turn on? They've had to water down the inheritance tax on farms. Now they're going to try and unpick the horrific business rates that have been levelled against, hospitality industry largely, the ones most suffering, especially pubs. I mean, this woman, she's desperately trying to find coins down the back of the sofa to pay for this ridiculous lifting of the two-child benefits cap, net zero zealousy, amongst other things. And every time she thinks she's managed to, muster up a quid or two, she's having to do a U-turn.
Yeah, essentially the government is now in a essentially no-win position because taxes are already very high and everyone's sick of them. So they have two choices. You can either bite the bullet and raise a big tax, which is of course what they promised they wouldn't do several times. That's, your income tax, national insurance, that kind of thing. Or if you don't do that, you end up having to scrabble around for as many little taxes as you can find. And often doing that means that there are lots of very unpopular consequences. I think in particular it's interesting because one of the things about Rachel Reeves' business rates hike is that many rural pubs would end up paying it for the first time. Now, I can tell you as a Conservative, because we know for certain, Labour won an awful lot of rural seats at the general election, many of them that they haven't won in a century, right? They took a lot of seats off the Tories. Now, you'd think, and maybe that's what this U-turn is, that would mean that Labour was a bit more sensitive to rural concerns than it has been in the past. But, absolutely not. We've seen, as you say, the farmers thing. We've got this business rates thing. Rural pubs are also going to be very badly hit if Labour does bring in this new, completely unnecessary reduction in the drink driving limit, which will make rural pubs almost impossible to operate. It's bizarre, and you're wondering, all those Labour MPs who've just taken a rural seat and maybe hoping to have a political career and hold on to it, what are they doing?
Well, they get booted out of the party if they don't vote in line with the government. That's what we've seen happen. I just think they hate Britain. I've just decided they want pubs shut. They want farms concreted over or turned into solar farms or whatever. You can't eat one of those panels. I just think they despise Britain, or else the woman can't do an impact assessment. Why is it when she comes up with all this increase in business rates, she doesn't know how this is going to affect the hospitality industry? She doesn't know how this is going to impact on small businesses. Instead, everybody has to learn the hard way. There has to be a load of noise, and then she has to do a climb down. Does she not own an abacus?
Well, I mean, maybe if we're thinking about hospitality, it peddles us alcohol and bad food, and that increases pressure on our NHS. So maybe actually, if there wasn't a hospitality industry, it would save the public money on public health. I honestly don't know. It's baffling. Look, as a Conservative journalist, I was perfectly happy to say at the end of the last period of Conservative government that they were rubbish. Right? Absolutely rubbish. I honestly, gave Labour quite a lot of rope before the general election because I thought, well, good Lord, look how badly this government's been performing. But no, they're actually just constantly, the bottom of the barrel is lower than I thought it could possibly be. It is incredible how badly they're doing.
Oh, no, indeed. And then the pet projects like this one, Sir Keir Starmer forcing through, it seems, the controversial digital ID scheme. It's going to cost, he says, 1.8 billion. Oh, bet it costs more than that. Nobody's been asked. It wasn't in the manifesto. We don't want it. The public are against it. It's evil. It's dystopian. It's controlling. Frankly, it's some sort of communist hellhole. And here he is forcing it through when apparently we're broke. I mean, like you said, how low is the bottom of the barrel?
I mean, I suppose in fairness to Sir Keir Starmer, if he only confined himself to what was in his manifesto, nothing was in his manifesto, more or less. And so he'd do absolutely nothing for 4 years. But it is a noticeable tendency with this Prime Minister that, you've got all of his talk about, my priority is growth, I'm Britain turning a corner. But what are the things that he actually puts the pedal to the metal on? None of which were in his manifesto. It's, as you say, digital ID cards. It's the assisted dying bill. It's the abortion up to birth, which was introduced in a few hours with no warning. So actually, this government, despite the fact that it ran on a very, very small C Conservative, quite thin manifesto, the whole point of Labour before the election was they were just in reassurance mode. The public already was sick of the Tories. They were just like, look, it's safe to vote Labour. Nothing big and dramatic is going to happen. We're just going to get the economy going again. Instead, the economy's in a tailspin. and they are just driving through lots of quite controversial social legislation about which there has been no national debate whatsoever.
Yeah, no, and like I said, I find it all extremely dystopian at this point. I'm beginning, because I now see the government through the prism of being communist control freaks. Everything they say now, I just think is gaslighting. Everything they say, I just assume is an inversion of the truth, because that's how they've made us feel ever since Southport. All of this stuff, like you said. I mean, look, other journalists just never asked Sir Keir Starmer any sensible questions in the run-up to the election. It's like, did you like going to the Taylor Swift concert with your kids? Oh, it was really lovely. Isn't he so nice? That was it. That was it. That's all they ever asked him. And now we're stuck with this. And he's trying to drag us into a war. He wants to put British boots on the ground in Ukraine. And defence chiefs are saying, hang on a second. We're 28 billion short over the next 4 years to even be able to half function. What is he doing?
I mean, the defence thing, you can only assume that that comes from simply not having paid attention in any of the briefings, right? Because do you remember a few months ago when Starmer was talking about putting troops in Ukraine in the event of a peace deal, and the army had to sort of leak a couple of days later that the British army could not deploy 10,000 troops to Ukraine, even if they didn't have to do any fighting, right? We simply don't have the means to do it. I know for a fact from speaking to some defence sources, if we wanted to put tanks in Ukraine, we can't, because we dissolved the railway regiment in 2014, and we simply don't have the railway cars that you need to put tanks on to get them there. At one point, he talked about putting ships in the Black Sea, apparently without wondering whether or not Turkey would let that happen. Answer, no. That's why there's no American ships in the Black Sea, and there have not been for several years. Right? Britain has some fast fighter jets. We could fly over Ukraine in the event of a peace deal, as long as they didn't have to do much actual fighting. But this is a serious problem for Britain, because, you know, for all the British foreign policy establishment loves talking about soft power basically is downstream of hard power. And hard power depends on being able to project military force. And the fact is that currently the British army is not really deployable at anything above sort of brigade strength. That's sort of about 5,000, 10,000, 5,000 people, right? We don't have a single deployable division. So for all this big talk, and it's not just Britain actually, other European leaders, with the exception of Poland and a few others in Eastern Europe, are exactly the same. Basically, the volume of the talk about, you know, the military role they want to play in Ukraine is almost in inverse proportion to the amount of money they actually spend on defense. Yeah, Russia has a quite rubbish economy by global standards, GDP the size of Spain, but it sends 7% of GDP on defense, and everything's cheap. So shock horror, they have a fairly capable army.
Yeah. No, I mean, it just seems absolutely mad. We're looking at a war of attrition. To say yes, you know, in the event of there being some sort of peace agreement, which, you know, is for the birds, quite frankly, we'll shove a load of British troops in there. I just think it's absolutely mental. I've been speaking to people who are ex-armed forces, and they all agree. They're just like, this is ridiculous. Let's talk now about, it's a hilarious little story, which is that apparently civil servants are going to all jump ship. This is the chatter of all the pubs down Whitehall. If Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister. I mean, good, I say. The civil service is supposed to be neutral. This is just exposing, isn't it, what a sort of left-wing cabal a lot of those people who hold those offices are part of. And if they want to quit in protest of having a populist party in charge, farewell, go on, off you go into the sunset.
I mean, yeah. I mean, actually, sort of unironically, if you are a civil servant and Britain ends up with an fairly elected government that you can't support, the right thing to do is resign, right? The wrong thing to do is to hang around in the civil service trying to sabotage its agenda. Now, I think, you know, generally speaking, a lot of Conservative complaints about the civil service will just sort of cope for the fact that given Conservative ministers weren't very good. But there are some departments, specifically sort of the Home Office and maybe the Foreign Office, where there has been a real problem. With sort of civil service resistance on the part of some civil servants, not the whole civil service, to the Conservative agenda. Now, I think in that case, the honourable thing and the right thing for those civil servants to have done, if they weren't prepared to say support Michael Gove's education agenda or whatever it was resign. And so it will be a challenge for reform in some respects. They do not have an awful lot of administrative experience. Britain has a big old state machine that they're going to have to get a grip on. But I think that, unironically, this is the right thing to do. If you're a civil servant who can't work for a reform government, and there is a reform government, you should resign.
No, I fully agree. And, well, Reform are talking about slimming down the civil service anyway, so better ahead of the game, I say. Henry, thank you ever so much. It's been a delight talking to you, and Happy New Year. A bit late, I know, but I haven't been in since New Year, so that's why I thought I'd do it then.